Good afternoon. I'm David Skeel, the chairman of the Financial Oversight and Management Board for Puerto Rico, and I'd like to welcome all of you who are joining us today for this 41st public meeting of the Oversight Board, which we're holding virtually, but we're also here, a number of us are here in person in the offices of the Oversight Board in San Juan. To kick things off, per usual, I'll start with a roll call to formally determine which board members are present, either here in the offices or by Zoom. So starting with Dr. Andrew Biggs.
I am present electronically. Good morning, or afternoon, pardon me.
Thank you, Andrew. Judge Arthur Gonzalez.
Present. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. Mr. Antonio Medina.
Presente.
Thank you, Antonio. Mr. John Nixon.
Present.
Thank you, John. I believe Dr. Betty Rosa is not with us, at least yet. Or speak now. No, she's not with us. And Governor Pedro Pierluisi, the ex officio member of the board. Are you here?
Present.
Thank you, Governor. We do have a quorum, and we can now call the meeting to order. As usual, I'd like to ask our General Counsel, Mr. Jaime L. Corey, if you would be willing to act as the secretary for the meeting.
Yes, I will. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Jaime. I'd like to thank everyone who is in attendance here in person, and those who are on Zoom, and those who are watching the live stream of the meeting via the Oversight Board's website, which is www.oversightboard.pr.gov. The audio of the meeting is available in English. It's also available in simultaneous Spanish translation, and it's being translated into sign language as well. If you log on to the English language website, you'll get the audio in English. If you log in to the Spanish website, you'll hear the simultaneous translation. As usual, we'll be handling any questions and comments from participants online through a form that's available on our website. You can find the form on the live stream page and complete it by putting your name on the form and adding any question or comment you might have. You can post comments or questions until 15 minutes before the end of the meeting, and we will promptly provide answers on our website. We'll also give an opportunity for any live comments towards the end of the meeting. We have a number of agenda items for today. First, as usual, the approval of minutes from our last public meeting and from the executive session since that public meeting. Second, administrative matters. Third, opening remarks and an update from the executive director. Fourth, remarks from our revitalization coordinator. Fifth, a discussion of the foundation for Puerto Rico's economy. Six, remarks from the governor of Puerto Rico. Seventh, public commentary. Eighth, any other matters. And then finally, adjournment. So the first order of business, as usual, is to approve our minutes and to do a couple of brief administrative matters. The last public meeting for which we have minutes, and the last public meeting was June 30, 2023. We've attached the minutes, the proposed minutes, as Appendix A. We also had a series of executive sessions on July 7, July 21, August 3, August 4, August 18, August 25, and September 12, 2023. Those minutes are attached to the materials as Appendix B. Are there any questions about the minutes? Don't hear any. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Mr. Chair, I move approval of the minutes for the dates that you mentioned.
Thank you, John. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Antonio. And per usual, we'll have a voice vote. I'll ask first for those in favor to say yes. Next, for those opposed to say no. And finally, any extensions to say they abstain. Would all in favor please say yes?
Yes.
Yes. Any opposed? Any abstentions? So the minutes are approved. And we have our 2 routine administrative matters as well. Would somebody make the first of those motions, Andrew?
I apologize. I cannot do my usual duties.
Oh, no.
I just don't have the language in front of me.
I can.
We'll get a pinch hitter for you, Andrew.
I'm happy to help out.
Thank
we've-
you, Antonio.
So, Mr. Chair, I would like to make the following motion. Between the adjournment of this meeting and the opening of the Oversight Board's next public meeting, the Oversight Board may consider in executive session any and all matters that is authorized to consider under PROMESA, including 1, any certification determinations authorized by PROMESA, including certification determinations under Section 206 of PROMESA, and 2, any submissions or authorizations authorized by PROMESA, and 3, any filings authorized under Title III of PROMESA, in each case that are set forth as part of the vote to convene such executive session. The Oversight Board may also act by unanimous written consent between meetings in accordance with its bylaws, with such consent to include consent by electronic transmission.
Thank you, Antonio. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, John. Once again, I'll take a voice vote. Would all in favor please say yes?
Yes.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? That motion passes as well. And then we have our other motion that relates to unanimous written consents. Would somebody make that motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to confirm and approve the UWCs adopted by the Oversight Board since the adjournment of our last public meeting, which are included in Appendix C.
Thank you, John. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Antonio. I'll take a voice vote. Once again, would all in favor please say yes?
Yes.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? That motion passes as well. And I will now turn to the substance of the meeting and open the floor to our Executive Director, Robert Mujica, for his opening remarks and an update on what we've accomplished since our last public meeting on June 30th of this year. Robert, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Chairman Skeel, board members, I want to give a brief overview of the Oversight Board's work since our last public board meeting in June. The highlight has certainly been the amended plan of adjustment for PREPA, which we filed last month. The plan reduces PREPA's debt by almost 80% to the equivalent of $2.5 billion. We know what is at stake for Puerto Rico. PREPA's debt restructuring is a crucial element of Puerto Rico's energy transformation and is an essential part of Puerto Rico's economic development. We need reliable electricity, and we needed a debt restructuring plan that will sustain PREPA's ability to operate and invest, and that would complete the transformation away from an outdated, monolithic government utility to a modern, diversified energy system with private operators, but under public ownership. That is why we so carefully analyzed PREPA's data, particularly the cost PREPA faces to implement the mandated energy efficiency initiatives. The amended plan that we filed in August reflects 3 important data sets: PREPA's cost structure, as outlined in the fiscal plan, bondholders' reduced claim following our litigation, and our analysis of how much the substantially reduced debt would cost Puerto Rican families. The Oversight Board carefully analyzed how much Puerto Rican households pay for their energy needs as a share of their income and used several metrics and various data sources. Studies point towards a so-called share of wallet that should not exceed 6% That is, the cost of energy should not exceed 6% of income in a household. The Oversight Board is aware that this practice is used in several states, and they consider 6% of household income as spent on energy as the affordability threshold. That is how we determine the electricity costs that should not exceed 6% of the average Puerto Rican household's income. In Puerto Rico, roughly half of PREPA's residential customers are low-income households. Under our proposed plan, low-income households need to be exempt completely unless they consume more than 425 kilowatt hours per month. The median bill for residential households not currently benefiting from subsidized electricity would increase by $8.71 per month, or 5%. For Puerto Rico's roughly 97,000 small businesses, the increase would be $35.53 per month, or an 8% increase. The creditors claim that PREPA owes them more than $20 billion in principal and interest. If Puerto Rico had to pay the debt claimed by the creditors, the average electricity bill for households would have increased by over $50 a month, rather than the $8.71 per month under the amended plan. The average bill for small businesses would increase by almost $132, rather than the $35.53 under the plan. We heard many concerned voices that this much smaller legacy charge from residents and businesses, and I understand those concerns, but the Oversight Board cannot fully protect households and businesses from increased rates. It is simply not legally possible. We cannot wipe out PREPA's debt entirely. We have to repay creditors at least part of what they're owed. That is the law. And we feel that we reached a fair compromise that is supported by a significant number of bondholders and other creditors. Creditor support is an important factor to gain the court's confirmation of the plan. Under the umbrella of mediation, a group of bondholders approached us with a realistic proposal for an agreement that was a true breakthrough. It took us to a fair, consensual plan of adjustment, and we understand that the terms might be difficult to accept for some bondholders. But we still hope we can get more to join the agreement. Under the amended plan, bond insurers would receive 12.5% of the amount the court determined PREPA owes the bondholders. The bondholders who agreed to support the plan would receive 44.4%. Bond insurer National, which also agreed to support the plan, would receive 68.4%, and the general unsecured creditors would recover approximately 13.5%. Finally, the fuel line lenders, who hold a very different kind of legal claim, would recover 84%. Given the situation that PREPA faces, we believe that these are fair recoveries. And the bottom line is this: the amended plan provides a path to end PREPA's bankruptcy. It will allow PREPA to remain as a sustainable utility, continue critical investments, and complete the current transformation plan of Puerto Rico's energy system to provide reliable energy to support Puerto Rico's economic growth and fiscal stability. The transformation has made substantial progress. The power system is now overseen by an independent operator. Working with government, we split the management of the grid from power generation and transferred management to private operators. And the people of Puerto Rico will retain the valuable asset and will remain under public ownership. With contracts that demand transparency, accountability, and regulatory oversight, as we create a path to implement the will of Puerto Rico's elected leaders to move aggressively towards renewable energy. Right now, renewables only represent 3 to 5% of Puerto Rico's energy mix. The Oversight Board will continue to do its part to achieve the renewable energy targets set through Act 17, and we will do so by ensuring solid contracts for renewable energy that are transparent and ensure competitive bidding. In March of 2022, the Oversight Board conditionally approved 18 renewable power purchase agreements. However, the execution of those agreements was delayed. 7 of those PPOAs since then had withdrawn or rejected by PREB. 11 were amended to adjust for inflation and other increased cost factors. But such increases are not unique to Puerto Rico. But the Oversight Board remains concerned about the amendments and the effect on future procurements and competition. The Oversight Board has been reviewing the amended agreements diligently, and we will conclude our review later this week. We know it is important for Puerto Rico to start increasing its share of renewable energy as soon as possible, and we will weigh our concerns against the need to start the much-delayed process towards renewable clean energy. Since the last public board meeting, we began a broad dialogue about the future of the University of Puerto Rico, and I hope that will take us to a strategic plan to meet UPR's challenges in the future. UPR and its academic and financial success is critical for Puerto Rico. UPR has been a center for academic excellence and an anchor for Puerto Rican cultural life, a training ground for Puerto Rico's intellectual leadership, and a driver for economic growth. We must restore its financial stability so it can claim the same essential role in Puerto Rico's future growth. In recent years, however, UPR has been facing serious financial and operational challenges, including falling enrollments, a pension system that is seriously underfunded, an aging infrastructure, and a bloated bureaucracy. UPR has suffered significant setbacks in its academic standing due to the losses of accreditations, particularly in the medical science area. You may remember, we outlined during the last public board meeting that UPR will receive a significant boost in government subsidies this fiscal year. UPR receives approximately $630 million of Puerto Rico government funding in fiscal year 2024, roughly half of its $1.25 billion budget. But beyond a robust public debate about government funding, there's been little consensus on the long-term economic model that will allow UPR to embrace its role at the center of Puerto Rico's economic growth agenda. That is why the Oversight Board, with the leadership of the University of Puerto Rico, the UPR Governing Board, set up a working group with experts from a broad range of disciplines, such as higher education and economic development, and the private sector, to develop strategic initiatives focused on academic excellence, economic development, and fiscal sustainability. The working group has met several times and will continue to meet at least twice a month until November, when we hope we have identified the strategies that will help to revitalize the University of Puerto Rico. Another challenge that UPR faces is an underfunded pension plan. We keep hearing that the plan is healthy. It is not. The UPR's own actuarial report shows the retirement system is funded in its plan of assets to liabilities at about 54%. The average public retirement system in the U.S., however, is at approximately 75%. Not only is funding of the ratio of the UPR's retirement system below average, the situation actually keeps getting worse. UPR underfunded the pension system for at least 2 years. The total actuarial contributions should have been $207 million in 2021. for example, but it reported only $160 million, an almost $50 million shortfall. In fiscal year 22, the contribution should have been $184 million, but it was only $162 million, $20 million short. The UPR governing board chose to implement a pension reform plan, closing the defined benefit plan to new participants and implementing a defined contribution plan for all new employees. The Oversight Board applauds the UPR governing board for taking this difficult step, particularly in the face of significant criticism and a lot of misinformation. More reforms must follow to ensure that UPR's pension system can keep the promises and commitments that it has made to its retirees. The Oversight Board will continue its commitment to working with UPR's leadership, the governor, the legislature, and of course the working group to develop a path forward for UPR and its continued progress in reforming the retirement benefits must be a key marker on UPR's roadmap to recovery. We also made progress over the last couple of months in our work with the government on the partial implementation of other laws that we are proceeding with. The Oversight Board and the FOF have made substantial progress to define the terms of the implementation of certain other plans that we are working with the government to move those forward, and we'll be announcing those shortly. And then finally, I'd like to formally welcome Jose Ramon Perez Riera as the Oversight Board's Revitalization Coordinator. Mr. Perez Riera is a critical team member for us at a defining moment in the next phase of the Oversight Board's work. Since the debt restructuring process is coming to a successful conclusion, our singular focus will be on restoring fiscal responsibility and economic growth. Fiscal responsibility means budgetary discipline, of course, but it also means prioritizing actions that will grow the economy of Puerto Rico and prioritize economic growth. All actions, all of the decisions of the board going forward must be focused and must be taken under the lens of how does it impact growth for the island. Title V of PROMESA accelerates investments in Puerto Rico's infrastructure. It created the position of the Revitalization Coordinator to review infrastructure projects for consideration as critical projects entitled to expedited permitting. Under PROMESA, the Oversight Board submits to the governor for appointment a Revitalization Coordinator. Governor Pierluisi designated Mr. Perez Riera as the Revitalization Coordinator. Mr. Perez Riera has the right experience for a very important task. He was Secretary for Economic Development and Commerce and worked in the private sector, advising international firms and investment banks, as well as private companies and individuals seeking to invest in Puerto Rico. So welcome, Mr. Perez Riera, and thank you, Professor Skeel.
Thank you, Robert. And I will turn things over very quickly right back to the new Revitalization Coordinator, Jose Ramon Perez Riera, to talk about his new role. So welcome from me as well, and the floor is yours, Jose Ramon.
Thank you, Chairman Skeel, Board Directors Nixon and Medina, Board Directors appearing remotely, Executive Director Mujica, and Governor Pierluisi. I appreciate the warm welcome that I have received from everybody here at the Oversight Board, and I am thrilled at the prospect and the opportunity to contribute once again to Puerto Rico's economic growth through public service. The Oversight Board and the Executive Director have been clear about the fact that now that the majority of the debt restructuring has been completed, that absolutely everything has to be looked at from a vantage point that focuses and emphasizes the need for long-term sustainable economic growth for Puerto Rico. As we are all aware, Puerto Rico finds itself at a critical juncture. We have been awarded billions of dollars in federal relief and stimulus funds that must be efficiently and effectively deployed to maximize the opportunity that Puerto Rico has been granted to reconstruct and revitalize its infrastructure and its economy as a whole. Title V of PROMESA allows for the creation of an expedited permitting process for critical projects, which, as Revitalization Coordinator, I will spearhead on behalf of the Oversight Board. However, the opportunity to impact our economy goes well beyond Title V. The Executive Director has asked me to see Puerto Rico's revitalization in a broader frame of mind, tied to other efforts that have a bearing on Puerto Rico's economic development and which I will focus on, in addition to Title V matters. These will include infrastructure development, structural reforms, and furthering economic development policies that require continuity in order to succeed. Together with the team here at the Oversight Board, I will connect PROMESA's vision of economic revitalization to matters that have an impact on Puerto Rico's infrastructure more broadly, and that also have a bearing on obtaining and maximizing public and private investment in our infrastructure. This will include working with the government to identify and obtain federal funding for infrastructure projects. We will focus on renewable energy projects that have the potential to reduce electricity costs and improve the reliability of our electric grid. We will also collaborate with the Commonwealth to move large-scale infrastructure initiatives and projects. Furthermore, we will be bringing a renewed focus on public-private partnerships, assisting the Commonwealth in seeking out such opportunities. We will also be making the Oversight Board's resources available to assist the Commonwealth in the management and the deployment of federal funds that we have received for Puerto Rico's reconstruction. Structural reforms to create a more solid foundation for economic growth have always been a major focus of the Oversight Board's work, and my work around revitalization will be, of course, tied directly into these major initiatives defined in the fiscal plan for Puerto Rico. I will work with the team here to see how my efforts in revitalization are connected to those structural reforms and the existing work by the Oversight Board, and what other efforts we may need to add or strengthen to promote long-term economic growth. Permits are, of course, at the core of my work as Revitalization Coordinator. Expedited permitting is the key to moving critical infrastructure projects forward. Unfortunately, we are all very well aware that permitting in Puerto Rico is an area that we must improve, and the Oversight Board will continue to push forward with permit reform. Puerto Rico must also reduce the number of occupational licenses that the government requires, as well as overhaul the property registry. Furthermore, we must engage in efforts to identify areas of excess government regulation that can be reduced and simplified. Finally, we will be looking at areas of interaction between the government and the private sector that are overly burdensome. For example, there is a need to facilitate government contracting processes for local businesses that provide services to the government, including continued improvements in procurement methodologies and assuring that local businesses are paid for their services in an expedited manner. As Revitalization Coordinator, I will also focus on furthering economic development policies that may benefit from the continuity that the Oversight Board may provide to increase the likelihood of success of such policies. The Oversight Board will be working closely with the government and with the private sector to create an economic development agenda to augment the roadmap that has already been defined in the fiscal plan. We will be assisting as well in optimizing economic development promotional efforts. And finally, we will be encouraging all efforts that increase the transparency, the accuracy, and the access that everybody has to all fiscal and economic data and other government information that may be useful to those that are looking to invest capital and create jobs in Puerto Rico that position our island for growth and for prosperity. I look forward to working and collaborating with the government of Puerto Rico, with our local private sector, as well as investors from abroad that are looking to invest in our future. Thank you, Chairman Skeel, Board Directors, Executive Director Mujica, and Governor Pierluisi.
Thank you, Jose Ramon. I'll now turn the floor over to Hermon Ojeda, our Municipal Affairs and Legislative Review Director. And Herman will give an overview of the foundation of what the Puerto Rico economy looks like today. Welcome, Herman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. As Professor Skill just mentioned, we will now take a look at some very important economic indicators to better understand what the economy of Puerto Rico looks like today. And we start with GDP. Thank you. So as shown on this particular slide, and to nobody's surprise, manufacturing represents the highest percentage of Puerto Rico's GDP with 43%, followed or being second, the real estate and rental sector. As you can also see, over a 5-year period, the professional, scientific, and technical services sector has demonstrated a significant growth of 45%, followed by growth of 28% in retail and real estate as well. Next slide, please. On this slide, we have a breakdown of those components of the manufacturing industry, where we can see that machinery manufacturing and apparel and related products show the highest percentage of growth from 2018 to 2022, whereas the computers and electronic products manufacturing, as well as beverage and tobacco products, show a decrease. In the case of the computers and electronic products, it's mostly attributable to COVID-19 pandemic and supply chain issues as a result thereof. In the case of tobacco products, these were mostly the result of the hurricanes back in 2017. Next slide, please. This is a graphic demonstration of the standing of each sector as it relates to GDP and total jobs on the island. Is another presentation of how retail trade has a significant presence in the number of jobs created on the island, whereas manufacturing, while has a smaller number of jobs as an industry, has a higher percentage of total GDP. Rental real estate has a relatively high portion of GDP, as mentioned before, but the job market contribution is relatively small. Next slide, please. Employment by sector, again, retail trade has a significant number of the percentage of jobs on the island, followed by healthcare and social assistance. The ones that have the most significant growth over a 4 or 5 year period, professional, scientific, and technical services, and construction. This mostly attributable to the reconstruction after the hurricanes and the flow of federal funds. Next slide, please. Total wages by sector. Here we see that manufacturing is again the top winner or contributor of wages on the different industries, followed by retail trade. We see a trend here of these two sectors being the most that contribute to the island's economy. Next slide, please. And finally, we have the annual average wages by sector, with the information sector having a significant portion at 16% within that particular sector. Knowledge and tech intensive sectors have the highest paying jobs. That's notable, whereas wages in the manufacturing sector have been stagnant over the past 5 years, experiencing lower growth when compared to other sectors. The other significant sector here is construction, which shows a decrease of 15% on annual average wage growth. That concludes this presentation, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Herman. I'll now turn the floor over to the governor of Puerto Rico, Governor Pedro Pierluisi, who would like to make a few comments and remarks. Welcome, Governor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I would like to thank Robert Mujica for his presentation. Overall, I agree with the way he described the board's work and its priorities in the recent past. I also want to praise Mr. Mujica's work ethic, habits, and the way that he's dealing with Puerto Rico government officials. He's accessible, and he goes out of his way to understand where we come from whenever we're, making any proposal, seeking any approval on the part of the board. And I personally know, and my top people attest to this as well, that this work style on the part of the board's executive director is permeating the rest of the staff of the board. So even though every now and then we disagree, and there's still a couple of lawsuits pending before the courts, I can only say that the working relationship that we now have with the board is very different than the one we had in the past. Perhaps part of it has to do with the fact that we have already restructured the central government's public debt, and the government's fiscal condition is in much better shape than before. Because I don't want to sound like I'm being critical to the board in the past. I am simply acknowledging that this is a new day. We're at a different juncture, and that probably has to do with the flow that I'm seeing in the relationship between the board and the government of Puerto Rico. As all of you know, and the public at large in Puerto Rico knows as well, Promesa is a bad chapter in Puerto Rico's history. It's not something we're proud about. And having a board around is not is something that we like as such. Let's say that it's something that we have to live with, but it is very important that we have the relationship we have been able to establish so that Puerto Rico goes forward and doesn't get stuck in its past, which is nothing that anybody here is proud of, particularly in the fiscal area. Having said that, I also want to welcome Jose Ramon Perez Riera. I've known Jose Ramon for a long time. He did a very good job, an excellent job as Secretary of Economic Development and Commerce in Puerto Rico. And he's been around. So I know that he's up to the task of being the board's new revitalization coordinator. And I agree that Jose Ramon can also be an asset in terms of advising the board as well as ourselves in general terms in the area of economic development. Infrastructure is key to our economic development, and the permitting process can be an obstacle to the economic development we want happening in Puerto Rico. That's where the revitalization coordinator comes into play, literally, if you follow the terms of the Promesa law. And so I look forward to working with Mr. Perez Riera. I know all the agency heads that deal with the permitting process will be available to him, accessible to him. And I like that he mentioned in his initial presentation that he will be particularly interested in expediting renewable energy projects in Puerto Rico. That's a key area. The transformation of our energy system is something that is required by local law. And we have quite a few renewable projects in the pipeline. some already contracted for, others will be contracted in the near future, and those permits are critical. I hope that the board not only uses its power to require expedited permitting in Puerto Rico, I also hope the board makes recommendations to federal agencies with jurisdiction insofar as the pending permits are concerned in the infrastructure area in general, but in particular in the area of energy, which again is crucial here in Puerto Rico. So again, welcome Jose Ramon, one of our own, leading Title V for the Promesa. So just make us proud. There are three topics that I will briefly mention. First, tax relief. Second, necessary changes in our Medicaid program in Puerto Rico. And lastly, and not less important, PREPA itself. In terms of tax relief, last month, I submitted to the legislature a critical tax bill that would provide much needed relief for individual and corporate taxpayers across Puerto Rico. The proposed legislation would provide significant tax relief for our working middle class, and tens of thousands of non-exempt corporations that are currently subject to very high rates will also receive significant tax relief. By the way, Puerto Rico has the second highest tax rate for corporations in the world. That's a statistic that is hard to swallow, and we better deal with it. And when I talk about the working middle class, I'm talking about those who haven't been able to receive the earned income tax credit because of the income range they fall into. We're talking about people earning between $40,000 roughly and $80,000 a year. I refer to them like the ham of the sandwich, and they really need our support. I firmly believe that the pending tax bill is imperative to spur our economy, and that it'll ultimately generate new streams of revenue as people and businesses find Puerto Rico to be a friendly place in which to work and do business. The bill also simplifies our tax system and facilitates compliance. By the way, the bill comes from recommendations we got from the private sector, including the CPAs, tax lawyers, the Chamber of Commerce, well, the whole gamut. So my administration is determined to work together with the board in the process of enacting legislation that achieves a fairer and more effective tax system in Puerto Rico, which will strengthen our local economy while attracting new investment and creating growth opportunities. With respect to Medicaid, what I want to mention is the following. My administration recently obtained the green light from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, we refer to them as CMS, to raise our Medicaid plan eligibility to 100% of the federal poverty level. I'm talking about for our plan, for our local Medicaid plan. This expansion, though, should not be treated as additional costs incurred or to be incurred by our Medicaid program, but rather as a continuation of coverage for those previously eligible due to the maintenance effort requirement under the coronavirus pandemic health emergency. Let me explain this a bit. The Puerto Rico Medicaid program, like all other states, is undergoing a recertification or redetermination process due to the ending of the pandemic health emergency on May 11th, 2023. During the emergency, states had to comply with the maintenance of effort requirements in order to receive additional Medicaid funding available under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. which allowed those who were no longer eligible for Medicaid to remain on Medicaid until the end of the emergency. In other words, we were not checking the eligibility of those who were already in the system. And let me add something. Actually, we stopped doing that after Maria because CMS gave us a waiver for that purpose. So we hadn't been double checking, if you may, the eligibility of Medicaid beneficiaries in Puerto Rico since at some point in late 2017. Right now, we're going through the recertification process. It began on April 1st, 2023, expanding eligibility to 100% of federal poverty level will bring back those who were previously eligible for Medicaid during the emergency, but no longer may qualify under the previous 85% of federal poverty level criteria. The net effect of the expansion that now CMS is allowing us to have should not add members to our Medicaid program, because the number of members no longer eligible for Medicaid due to the ending of the emergency and the maintenance of effort requirement is likely to be greater than the number of new members eligible due to the expansion. So I hope that the board will work with us so that we have a stable Medicaid program in Puerto Rico to the extent we can, given the block grant that Congress has authorized for us for the next 4 or so years. The last topic I would like to raise is PREPA. And I'll be brief. I'm on the record here. The government supports a plan of adjustment in terms of PREPA's debt that is sustainable. In other words, affordable. It makes no sense for anybody, be it a creditor of PREPA or anybody else, including customers of PREPA, for PREPA's debt to be at the end of this process, at the end of the plan of adjustment, to remain at a level causing a significant increase in the cost of electricity in Puerto Rico. You have to put this in context. We are paying a lot for electricity in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is not competitive with everybody else in the States and a lot of countries in our region in the area of electricity. The only place in America paying more for electricity is Hawaii. And the economy of Hawaii is totally different than the economy of Puerto Rico. As Herman Ojeda was showing us, our economy is highly dependent or reliant on manufacturing. Manufacturing is very energy intensive. Tourism is another key area in Puerto Rico. Actually, that's one number I saw in the schedule that I think I disagree with. And probably it's the way that it's being measured. Puerto Rico is booming in the tourism area, but all these hotels we have, the cost of energy is one of the most important costs that they incur. So, and I can go on and on and on. It's in nobody's interest for PREPA, in this case, or call it LUMA, to increase electricity rates in Puerto Rico because of the debt restructuring. I agree that in the final analysis, there will be an amount of debt that PREPA will have to pay. And I acknowledge that PREPA hasn't been paying debt while the Title III process has been ongoing. I acknowledge that. But going forward, it is very important that we keep in mind that having a significant increase in the cost of electricity is going to harm harm the economy of Puerto Rico, seriously harm the economy of Puerto Rico, incentivize even more businesses, including manufacturing businesses, retail businesses, tourism businesses, to disconnect from the electric service provided by Luma in place of PREPA. And so if you're a creditor of PREPA, that's not the scenario that you want to see. You want to ensure that PREPA will be, PREPA and through Luma will be managing a reliable, resilient, and cost-effective energy system. Otherwise, there will be mass disconnection from that system, affecting the very revenues that should be in part used to repay the debt. In the final analysis, the Energy Bureau, by local law, Puerto Rico law requires the Energy Bureau to be the one ensuring that PREPA's budget, when the time comes, incorporate the debt service resulting from this debt restructuring. It'll be the Energy Bureau the one ensuring that PREPA's budget has the necessary resources or revenues to allow PREPA to satisfy all its payment obligations, including the service of debt. That's going to be the Energy Bureau's role when the time comes. PREPA will have to pay its bills. I'll be the first one doing all I can, even though obviously I don't run PREPA directly. I'll be the first one ensuring that PREPA pays its bills when the time comes. But it makes no sense, again, to sadden PREPA or basically end up having a plan of adjustment that causes, I repeat, a significant increase in the debt of PREPA. One thing that is ongoing that is very relevant to this discussion is that we just hired Genera PR precisely to obtain savings in the operation of PREPA, to obtain savings in the reduction, to reduce the cost of operating the legacy assets of PREPA, to gradually but surely decommission or disconnect those legacy assets, and to reduce the cost of fuel for PREPA through its best practices. And that's something that we will be seeing as we go along. So when the time comes and we have an affordable, sustainable plan of adjustment, it'll be the Energy Bureau's role to make sure that what I am saying would be a terrible scenario, it does not happen. So count on my support on the board's efforts to reduce PREPA's debt. I have to praise the board's efforts because we at the very start of this debt restructuring process, the initial proposal was in the range of paying 80% of PREPA's debt, which would be atrocious, would be clearly catastrophic. And now we're talking about roughly paying 20% of PREPA's outstanding debt. That is progress. But it's not because we want to hurt creditors. It's just because everybody needs to be real here. Everybody needs to be pragmatic here. And it is in the best interest of everybody, creditors, customers, the public at large in Puerto Rico, to have, again, a working, reliable, resilient, and cost-effective energy system in Puerto Rico. I hope this is taken into account by the members of the board, as well as Judge Taylor Swain, when the time comes to make her decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Governor. Does anybody on the board want to make any comments about any of the things that we've been talking about? Antonio?
Sure. I would just like to briefly mention it's been a very, very difficult process to get through the PREPA restructuring. Clearly, we understand the needs of the people of Puerto Rico, and we truly empathize with the reality that energy costs are extremely high in the island. We do support, or at least I do support, the movement to renewable energies as part of the solution. And we do have significant capital still to be deployed to improve the generation, distribution, and transmission. But on the other hand, the reality is that from a legal standpoint, we just cannot walk away from the debts that the Commonwealth, or in this case, the power company, entered into over many, many years. I personally believe that is a huge accomplishment to have a significant number of creditors signed up at this point to a plan of adjustment that reduces the overall debt of PREPA by about 80%, while ensuring that we don't have to cover all the post-petition claims, which is all the accrued interests on those monies from the time that we enter into bankruptcy till today. If we had to cover 100% of the debt and at the post-petition claim, Puerto Rico would be in a very, very different scenario. It would be very difficult for the Commonwealth to really process that level of debt. And certainly the impact on the people of Puerto Rico would be very significant. I do look forward to continue working with the government and the administration, as well as my fellow board members, to try to get to the best solution possible that balances all different interests, but especially the interests of the people of Puerto Rico and the consumers, as we really have put front and center the interests of our people in these discussions.
Thank you, Antonio. John, did you?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just real quickly, I'll just add, I mean, this has been a mountain of work, and I just want to take a second and really express appreciation for our team, led by Mr. Mujica and Ms. Dresco before that, and all of our advisors and our negotiators as we've been going through this process. The PREPA deal was about as tough, and it's not over yet, but very tough because there aren't any good answers. I mean, we're bankrupting several $1 billion. That's money of people that have loaned into the system that are not going to get paid back. Rates are going up. And it's just there weren't really any easy or good answers. But there's been a huge amount of work done. We're in a position where hopefully we can go forward at this point if once the plan's confirmed. But it's really important that as we start looking to lay the groundwork for a solid Puerto Rico going forward, so that we don't have to ever live through this again, so the people of Puerto Rico don't ever have to live through these bankruptcies or these austerity measures again. And as we as a board now turn and shift our focus to good budget principles, financially responsible financial controls, I think it's work that is very pivotal in making sure that we chart a sustainable path going forward. And I look forward to working with the team and making sure that's a reality, and working with the governor and the legislature and incorporating those good financial principles so we don't wind back up into this. I certainly don't. I just want people to realize that while we are where we are and there's been a lot of work, there's also been a lot of pain and a lot of people who are taking quite large haircuts in money that they've loaned into the system. And so we just need to make sure that we learned from what we've done here and learned about how we got into this problem to begin with, and really hopefully commit to managing the financial affairs of the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico so we never do it again.
Thank you, John. Any other comments from the board? Okay, so we'll shift to public commentary. We have some questions that have come in, and we'll go through those questions in order, basically, I think.
Hello, Mr. Chairman. We have received questions from the public. I'm going to read them now. First, our questions regarding Act 80. Mr. Mujica, if you can provide some update on this matter.
On Act 80, the board remains committed to implementing, the early retirement program. As you know, the law was passed in 2020, and in 21, it was amended by the court. Since then, we've been working together with the government to try to come up with an agreed-to solution that would satisfy the court order. It's been a long time in going back and forth with the government, although we think we are close to coming to a resolution there. So we expect to have something to report very soon on the issue that we'll be able to file with the court and also present to the public. We know it's been a long time and there are a lot of people that have been waiting. We think we're very close to doing something, but we need to resolve the final details so that we can provide the court and the public with the final agreement. But we want to make sure that all of the eligible employees, as originally intended, are eligible. So hope to report back on that very soon.
Thank you. Our next question is regarding PREPA. Will electricity rates need to increase to pay the new PREPA debt?
I'll say a few words about that. There will be a legacy charge in connection with the proposed plan of adjustment. The legacy charge consists of a very small connection fee, about $1 a month for folks who do have to pay any of this, which is only about half of customers, plus what's called a volumetric charge, which is a charge for your use of electricity. When you put this together, the increase in electricity bills will be very small. It will only be 5% of the average customer's bill. So there is a bill, there is a charge, but it is, under this proposed plan, it's very small for the residential customers that do pay for the charge. And the charge, as the governor was saying a few minutes ago, is subject to PREB's approval, so PREB will have a role in the process as well.
Thank you, Chairman. Next question is same topic. If bondholders opposing PREPA's proposed plan of adjustment are successful in their appeals at the First Circuit or Supreme Court, will utility rates need to increase substantially to pay their debt?
Well, the main thing to say about this is we're confident that this plan will be confirmed, that it is a confirmable plan. It has significant support from creditors. It has the support already of roughly 43% of all of PREPA's creditors. That includes support of a number of classes that is large enough for those classes to vote yes, which means at least requires at least 2/3 of those classes to vote yes. So there's a lot of support behind this plan. There will be appeals, most likely. We can't really speculate about what will happen with them. I'll just say that we're confident that we have a confirmable plan. And that at the end of the day, this is more or less what it's going to look like for PREPA and its customers.
We also received questions about retail bondholders' opportunity to participate in the forward delivery bond purchase commitment.
I'll say a couple of words about that as well. The main thing I think to say there is that retail bondholders are invited to join this agreement. It's not just an agreement for institutions, it's an agreement for retail bondholders as well. So it will be open for them to join. The other thing that I'll say is that bondholders under this plan will be paid, or these bondholders would be paid or will be paid in cash. And so that makes the plan more attractive as well as in my view. But main thing to say is this is very much open to retail bondholders as well as institutional bondholders.
The next question is for Mr. Mujica about funding of the Office of the Ombudsman for the Veterans. Can you provide any update on that?
Well, the current fiscal year's budget included funding for the Veterans Advocate Office. $2 million in appropriation was there for rental costs provided for veterans. We think this was a sufficient amount of resources. This is the same amount that was requested by the government for the office. So there was not an amount higher than this that was requested. So the amount that was requested was fully funded in the office, fully funded in the budget. Those funds are there, and we think that the office has been adequately funded.
We also have a question. Has the government already presented a budget that is certified as a balanced one?
So under PROMESA, the budgets have to be balanced according to modified accrual standards. That is, and it has to be, not only does the Commonwealth budget have to be balanced under modified accrual, but all covered entities as well, including PREPA, including the others. So all of them have to be covered under modified accrual. We're looking at the last budget to see if it was indeed balanced. And modified accrual also means that you're not using revenues, you're not using fund balances from previous years to cover costs that you incur in the present year. What was very encouraging is that last year, for the first time in 3 prior times, the government submitted a budget that was certified. It went to the legislature. Both houses of the legislature passed the budget that was certified by the board, and then the board then certified the budget. So the government in its entirety actually passed the budget that, assuming you get to the end of the year, nothing has happened, would be balanced. That was the first time that it happened in the prior 2 years. In the prior years, the governor had submitted a budget that was in compliance, but unfortunately, one or more houses of the legislature didn't act, so you didn't have the full government actually passing it. Last year, although, that has happened, and we hope that's a trend that will continue as we go forward. As I pointed out in my comments, the bankruptcies are largely over, which is the resettling of the debt, the restructuring of the debt. We now know how much we have to pay for the plans of adjustments going forward. That's part of PROMESA. The second key element is restoring fiscal responsibility. It is hard to budget when you don't know how much you're going to owe for the debt in prior years. Now we know. We know what the fixed costs are for the debt going forward. We know now what the fixed costs are for pensions are going forward. The government now knows that. Budgets can now be set based on knowledge of what are those fixed costs. And obviously you have new costs going forward. But again, last year was, I think, pivotal in the sense that all parties actually passed a budget together. We talked about it at a previous board meeting. So we're looking at to see whether or not the prior budgets are balanced under modified accrual standards, which is a more rigorous standard than a cash budgeting standard, but it's designed and it was on the PROMESA to restore fiscal responsibility.
Thank you, Executive Director. We have some other questions, but we will answer and provide all the answers in our website. That will be all.
Thank you, Sylvette. I'd like to thank our staff who's worked tirelessly both for this meeting and, as John Nixon was saying earlier, in general over the past 7 years for everything that they've done. I'd like to thank everybody who has joined us here today. And as Sylvette just mentioned, the other questions that have just come in we'll answer promptly through the board's website. That brings the substance of the meeting to an end, so I think we can adjourn. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Antony. Thank you, John. All in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Any opposed, say no. Any abstentions? And that officially brings the meeting to a close. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.